They thought the little house at the edge of Savannah had gone silent for good, just another lonely place swallowed by summer heat and hanging Spanish moss. David Miller had not opened his door to anyone in years. Loud noises sent him to the floor. Thunder turned his blood cold. Then a rescue shelter called about a German shepherd nobody wanted. Rex had once been a proud K9, trained to find explosives, until one blast left him shaking at every storm. "He's useless now," they said. David almost walked away. But when a truck backfired outside, both man and dog dropped to the ground at the same time. Neither moved. Neither pretended to be brave. That night, thunder rolled over Savannah like an angry god. David locked every door. Rex hid under the table. And when the house shook, the broken veteran whispered, "Come here, boy." For the first time, neither of them faced the war alone. Summer in Savannah pressed down like a warm, wet hand, filling the old streets with cicada song, cut grass, river mud, and thunder waiting beyond the trees. David Miller lived in a small wooden house at the edge of the city, where the sidewalks thinned out and the live oaks leaned over the road like tired giants guarding a forgotten kingdom. The house had once been white, but years of heat, rain, and neglect had faded it into the color of old bone. Spanish moss hung from the branches above the roof, swaying in the humid air like gray hair on ancient spirits. People in the neighborhood knew David's name, but very few knew his voice. He was 43 years old, broad-shouldered, with the solid frame of a man who had once carried heavy things without complaint rifles, packs, wounded friends, memories no one could see. His dark hair was cut short, more from habit than vanity, and his beard grew in rough along his jaw, never quite clean, never quite wild. His blue eyes had the strange stillness of deep water after a storm, calm only because something had already sunk beneath the surface. He had served overseas, come home with medals in a drawer, scars under his shirt, and a mind that still believed every sudden sound was the beginning of another attack. To the world, he looked quiet. Inside, he lived beside a battlefield that refused to become history. During the day, David repaired furniture in the shed behind his house. Chairs with broken legs, tables split by age, rocking chairs that creaked like old men telling secrets. He liked wood because wood did not ask questions. If something was cracked, he could sand it, brace it, glue it, clamp it, and wait. People were harder. People wanted explanations. They wanted eye contact. They wanted him to say he was fine, so they could believe in a happy ending and go home before dinner. David had learned to give small nods instead of answers. When Mrs. Bennett from 2 houses down waved at him with a plate of peach cobbler, he pretended not to hear. When children rode past on bicycles and shouted hello, he lifted one hand but did not smile. It was not that he hated people. He simply feared how easily kindness could become a doorway, and doorways, in his experience, were where danger entered. At night, the old house became too large. Every room seemed to breathe. The refrigerator clicked, and David's fingers tightened. A car backfired 3 streets away, and his body hit the floor before his thoughts arrived. Fireworks on summer weekends were the worst. They cracked open the sky and pulled him backward through time, back to dust, smoke, burning metal, and a young soldier named Harris calling for his mother, in a voice David still heard when the world went quiet. So David slept with one lamp on, his back against the wall, boots beside the bed, as if some part of him still expected orders before dawn. He was not a coward. That was what made the shame worse. He had walked into gunfire once. Now a dropped pan could bring him to his knees. The gods of war, he thought bitterly, had a cruel sense of humor. One July afternoon, after a thunderstorm tore through Savannah and left branches scattered across the roads, David drove his old pickup to the County Animal Rescue Center to repair a section of fence. The shelter sat behind a line of chain-link gates, low and sun-baked, smelling of wet concrete, dog food, bleach, and nervous hope. Clara Brooks, the shelter manager, met him near the entrance. Clara was a woman in her late 50s with copper-brown skin, silver-threaded black hair pulled into a tight braid, and the practical eyes of someone who had seen too many animals abandoned for foolish reasons. She was short, sturdy, and moved with brisk purpose, but her voice softened whenever she spoke to the dogs. Clara believed in second chances, though she carried that belief like a heavy toolbox rather than a church hymn. "Fence is back there," she told David, handing him a clipboard. "Storm dropped half a tree on it. Nobody escaped, thank God, though one terrier tried to file a legal complaint." David almost smiled. Almost. He followed her past the kennels, keeping his shoulders tight against the barking. The noise struck him in layers, sharp yelps, low growls, metal doors rattling, claws scraping concrete. He forced himself to breathe slowly. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. A trick given to him by a therapist named Dr. Allen, a thin, gentle man with round glasses and the impossible optimism of a lighthouse keeper. David had stopped going after 3 sessions. He had not disliked the man. He had simply hated being seen. Then he heard a different sound. Not barking, not whining. A low, controlled growl came from the last kennel near the corner, where the shadows were cooler. David turned before he meant to. Inside stood a German shepherd, large but too thin, with black and tan fur dulled by stress and patches of roughness along his shoulders. His ears were high, his body rigid, his muzzle graying just enough to show he was no young dog. 6 years old, maybe. His amber-brown eyes were fixed on David with fierce intelligence, not wild, not stupid, just wounded and ready. A faded working harness hung on a hook outside the kennel, and beneath the dog's name, written in black marker, was one word, Rex. He used to be a K9, Clara said quietly. Explosives detection. Good dog. Brave dog. She paused, and the pause told David the rest before she did. There was a blast during his last assignment. After that, thunder, fireworks, engines, anything loud sets him off. He bit a handler who grabbed him during a panic episode. They retired him, but nobody wants a retired dog who's scared of noise and built like a wolf with unpaid taxes. Rex growled again, as if objecting to the tax comment. David looked away, but not fast enough. Something in the dog's eyes had already reached him. There was no begging there, no softness. Rex did not want pity any more than David did. He looked like a soldier stripped of rank and left with nothing but memory. A truck passed on the road beyond the shelter and backfired with a violent crack. The world vanished. David dropped hard to one knee, one hand braced on the concrete, breath gone from his chest. At the same instant, Rex slammed low against the kennel floor, ears flat, teeth bared not in aggression but terror. The barking around them erupted, but David heard only the echo inside his skull. Smoke, sand, Harris, the impossible brightness of fire. His heart pounded like a fist against a locked door. Then, through the ringing in his ears, he saw Rex. The dog was trembling, not attacking, not useless, trembling. David slowly lifted his head. Rex lifted his at the same time. Man and dog stared at one another through the chain-link fence, both caught in the same invisible net. Clara said nothing. Even the shelter seemed to hold its breath. David swallowed, his voice rough when it finally came. "You too, huh?" Rex stopped growling. It was not trust. Not yet. Trust was too holy a thing to arrive in one afternoon. It was only recognition, small and bright as a match struck in a cave. David had come to fix a broken fence. Instead, he found a creature guarding the same dark doorway inside himself. Not a cure, not a miracle. Just another survivor who understood the sound of thunder before the storm arrived. And for the first time in years, David did not feel entirely alone behind the closed door. David signed the adoption papers the next morning, while Savannah steamed beneath a white summer sun and the shelter fans pushed hot air around like they were too tired to argue with July. Clara Brooks stood beside the counter with her arms folded, watching him the way a mother might watch a boy reaching for a hot stove. Beside her was Sarah Whitaker, the shelter's adoption coordinator, a tall woman in her early 30s with pale freckled skin, straight chestnut hair tied into a practical ponytail, and green eyes that looked gentle until paperwork or cruelty appeared in front of her. Sarah had grown up around rescue animals after her father, a quiet firefighter, brought home injured strays from accident scenes. Because of that, she had learned to love broken creatures without pretending they were easy. She slid Rex's file across the counter and said, "Mr. Miller, I need you to understand what you're taking home. Rex has bitten before. He panics around loud sounds. He may destroy furniture. He may never become the dog he used to be." David looked at the file but did not open it. He could already imagine what was inside. Behavior warnings, risk notes, careful phrases written by people trying to sound kind while giving up. He glanced toward the kennel hallway, where Rex stood stiff and silent behind the chain link, watching every movement like a prisoner expecting betrayal. "I may never become the man I used to be either," David said. Sarah blinked once, then gave a small laugh that broke in the middle and almost turned into tears. Clara looked away, pretending to check a clipboard, because some mercies were too naked to stare at directly. Getting Rex into the truck took nearly 40 minutes. The German Shepherd did not lunge, but he refused every invitation. He stood with his paws planted, black and tan body rigid, graying muzzle low, amber brown eyes bright with suspicion. David did not pull the leash. He did not crouch too close or soften his voice into baby talk. He simply opened the passenger door, placed an old army blanket on the seat, and stepped back. "Your choice," he said. The words were meant for the dog, but they sounded like something he wished someone had said to him years ago, before doctors, officers, and well-meaning relatives tried to push him into healing like shoving furniture through a narrow door. Rex stared at the truck, then at David, then at the open road beyond the shelter. At last, with the dignity of a dethroned king agreeing to temporary exile, he jumped into the passenger seat. Clara muttered, "Well, I'll be blessed." Sarah whispered, "Good luck." David shut the door carefully, as though closing a church instead of a truck. The drive home was silent except for the old engine and Rex's uneven breathing. David kept both hands on the wheel. Rex sat upright, too proud to lie down, claws digging into the blanket whenever another vehicle passed. Each time a motorcycle growled nearby, the dog's body tightened, and each time, David felt the same invisible wire pull inside his own ribs. Neither of them made a sound. That became their first agreement. Fear was allowed in the truck. Shame was not invited. At the house, Rex entered like an inspector of enemy territory. He sniffed the porch, the doorframe, the hall, the faded rug, the kitchen table with one uneven leg David had never bothered to fix for himself. The house smelled of sawdust, old coffee, lemon oil, and a loneliness so settled it might have been part of the wood. Rex chose the space beneath the kitchen table. He lowered himself there with his back to the wall and his eyes on every exit. David understood the strategy. He had slept the same way for years. He placed a bowl of water near the table, then stepped back into the living room. Rex did not drink until David looked away. Later, David placed food down and retreated again. It went on like that for days. Bowl down, man back. Bowl empty only after the room became quiet. They lived together like two ruined kingdoms separated by a border made of linoleum and silence. Those first days did not glow with easy redemption. Rex chewed the corner of a chair when a garbage truck clattered outside. David found the shredded wood, sighed, and said, "That chair was ugly anyway." Rex knocked over a lamp during a panic, and David fixed the shade with duct tape, giving it the solemn respect of a battlefield bandage. Once, when David reached too fast for a drop spoon, Rex snapped the air near his wrist. The sound should have made David angry. Instead, it made him very still. He saw the dog's terror arrive half a second after the warning bite, saw the confusion in his eyes, the awful question, "Did I ruin this too?" David slowly set the spoon down. "We're not doing perfect here," he said. "We're doing alive." Rex stared from under the table, breathing hard. Alive, David thought, was sometimes an unimpressive miracle. No trumpets, no angels, just one more evening survived without anyone leaving. On the fifth night, summer gathered itself into a storm. The air thickened. Cicadas screamed from the oak trees. Clouds rolled over Savannah, purple-black and swollen, like old gods dragging wet robes across the sky. David felt it before the first thunder came. His shoulders rose, his palms dampened. He checked the locks twice, then hated himself for checking them a third time. Under the kitchen table, Rex had already folded into a tight shape, ears pinned, body trembling with a violence he tried to hide. David sat in the armchair facing the window, telling himself it was only weather, only pressure, only sound. Then the sky cracked. The thunder hit so hard the windows shivered. David was on the floor before he knew he had fallen, one hand over his head, breath coming in broken pieces. The living room disappeared. For several seconds he was nowhere in Georgia. He was back inside heat and dust and metal, back with Harris screaming, back with the taste of smoke in his mouth. Beneath the kitchen table, Rex let out a low, wounded whine. Not a dog's complaint, but the sound of something ancient being struck in the dark. The storm hammered the roof. Rain lashed the glass. Somewhere outside, a trash can rolled down the street like a drunken little cannon, because apparently the universe still had jokes. David pressed his forehead to the floorboards. "Breathe," he whispered. though he did not know whether he meant himself or the dog. Another thunderclap shook the house. Rex cried out. David wanted to crawl to him, but he remembered the snap of teeth, the warning in Sarah's voice, the sacred law of wounded things. Do not corner them and call it love. So he stayed where he was. Minute by minute, the storm raged. Minute by minute, neither of them became brave. But then David heard claws scrape against the kitchen floor. Rex emerged from beneath the table, low to the ground, shaking so hard his collar tags trembled. He stopped exactly an arm's length from David. Not touching, not asking, only near. David turned his head slowly. Rex lay down facing him, eyes wide, chest rising fast. David did not reach out. He did not command, comfort, or claim victory. He only lowered himself fully onto the floor, making his body small beside the dog's fear. Two broken soldiers, one human and one canine, listened as thunder rolled over the house like a furious giant losing a bowling match in heaven. The room did not become safe. The memories did not vanish, but the space between them warmed by 1 quiet inch. And for that night, 1 inch was enough. Savannah grew heavier as July deepened, its summer heat rising from the streets like breath from a sleeping animal, while cicadas screamed in the live oaks as if warning the sky not to break again. David Miller learned first that Rex's fear had a rhythm. It did not arrive all at once, roaring through the door like an enemy. It crept in by inches. The German shepherd's ears would twitch before thunder was close enough for human hearing. His amber-brown eyes would sharpen, then widen. The muscles along his black and tan shoulders would tighten under his rough coat, and his front paws would press against the floor as if he were preparing to hold the whole house down by force. David began to notice these small signs the way a sailor reads wind on dark water. When Rex's ears folded, David dimmed the kitchen light. When the dog's breath quickened, he lowered the volume of the room itself. No clattering dishes, no slammed drawers, no sudden movement. He started leaving the weather radio on at night, turned low, the calm voice of the announcer murmuring about pressure systems and coastal storms, like some tired priest reciting prayers to a nervous congregation. Rex never thanked him. Rex was not that kind of dog. But sometimes, when the thunder stayed far away, he stopped hiding beneath the table and lay beside it instead, which David considered a royal treaty signed by a king who still distrusted pens. Rex learned David too. The dog watched him with the hard patience of an old soldier posted at a gate. He learned that when David rubbed the scar near his left ribs, memories had begun walking barefoot through his mind. He learned that when David sat too still in the armchair, staring at nothing, the man was not resting. He was gone somewhere, dragged backward into a place Rex could not see but somehow recognized. At first, Rex only watched from beneath the table. Then, one afternoon after a delivery truck rattled down the street and David froze with one hand gripping the sink, Rex crawled forward and placed his chin on David's boot. Not his hand, not his lap. Just the boot, safe enough to deny affection if anyone accused him of it. David looked down, throat tightening. "That your medical opinion?" he asked. Rex gave a slow blink. David took it as yes. Their life did not transform into one of those bright stories people like to tell over coffee, where wounds vanished because love entered the room wearing clean shoes. Nothing about them was clean. David still woke sweating from dreams he could not explain. Rex still barked at the garbage truck as if it were a demon with wheels and a municipal schedule. On the 4th of July, David turned off every light, sat on the hallway floor, and fed Rex small pieces of chicken whenever fireworks cracked across the city. He ate half the chicken himself by accident because panic apparently made a man stupid and hungry. "We're coping," he told the dog through a mouthful. Rex looked offended, perhaps because the chicken distribution system lacked justice. Still, that night neither of them broke completely. They shook, they breathed, they stayed. Small victories came quietly, almost embarrassed by themselves. David stepped onto the front porch every morning and remained there through one full cup of coffee. At first, he stood with his back near the door, ready to retreat. Later, he sat in the old rocking chair with Rex lying just inside the threshold, half shadow, half guardian. Rex began eating while David was still in the kitchen, though he kept one suspicious eye on him, as if David might suddenly become a marching band. David stopped checking the locks 3 times before bed. 2 times became enough. Some nights, 1 time became possible, though he lay awake afterward feeling reckless, like a man who had insulted fate and was waiting for fate to file paperwork. Rex no longer slept fully under the table. He stretched beside it, long body angled toward the door, graying muzzle resting on his paws. Neither of them called this healing. Healing sounded too official, too polished, like a certificate hung on an office wall. What they had was smaller and more sacred, the slow permission to remain. Across the narrow street lived Mary Wilson, a widow of 71 with a round face, warm brown skin, silver curls that refused discipline, and a laugh that could make a screen door seem musical. Mary had been a school cafeteria cook for 30 years, which meant she had survived burned biscuits, children with mysterious stomachaches before math tests, and principals who believed one tray of baked chicken could feed the entire kingdom. Her husband, Earl, had died 6 years earlier from a heart condition, leaving her with a tiny yellow house, a garden full of stubborn tomatoes, and a habit of feeding lonely people whether they admitted to hunger or not. Mary had noticed David long before Rex arrived. She had seen how he moved like a man apologizing to the air for taking up space. But Rex changed something. A man alone could hide. A man with a large German shepherd who glared at mailboxes like sworn enemies became community news. The first morning she crossed the street, Mary carried a covered plate and wore a blue summer dress patterned with lemons. Rex stood on the porch beside David, stiff as a statue carved by an anxious sculptor. Mary stopped at the bottom step, looked at the dog, and said, "Well now, aren't you a serious gentleman? You look like you inspect souls for unpaid taxes." David's mouth twitched despite himself. Rex did not move, but his nose worked furiously toward the plate. "This is peach cobbler," Mary continued. "For you, Mr. Miller. Not for Officer Furry judgment here, unless he learns manners and possibly files a request in writing." David should have said thank you and gone inside. That was the old pattern. Door open, kindness received, door closed, before kindness could grow roots. Instead, he stood there holding the plate, feeling its warmth seep through the towel into his palms. Mary's eyes were bright but not nosy. She did not ask about the war. She did not ask about the dog. She simply looked at the two of them with a softness that did not demand performance. "Storms are coming again this week," she said. "You boys holler if the sky gets too rude." "We don't holler much," David replied. Mary smiled. "Then grunt with purpose. I speak veteran and dog both, for the first time in months, maybe years." David laughed. It was small, rusty, and startled him so badly he almost dropped the cobbler. Rex turned his head sharply, as if checking whether the sound was dangerous. It was not. It was only a cracked bell ringing after a long silence. That evening the heat pressed against the windows, and thunder mumbled far beyond the river. David sat on the porch with Rex beside him, not under the table, not hidden in the hall. Across the street, Mary watered her tomatoes and waved once. David lifted his hand. Rex placed his chin on David's boot, anchoring him to the wooden boards, to the damp summer air, to the world that had not ended yet. The sky still held storms. The past still had teeth. But between a lonely man, a rejected dog, and a widow with peach cobbler, something fragile had begun to grow. By late August, Savannah's summer had become a fever dream of swollen clouds, wet brick streets, river wind, and thunderheads gathering above the city like dark judges preparing their verdict. The storm arrived just before sunset, rolling in from the Savannah River with a force that made the old houses groan as if they remembered every hurricane ever buried in the city's bones. Along River Street, tourists ran beneath awnings, shop signs swung wildly, and rain hammered the cobblestones until the whole historic district shone like black glass. Farther out, near David Miller's quiet street, the live oaks bent beneath the wind, their Spanish moss whipping like torn gray banners. David had felt the storm coming all afternoon. His hands had been unsteady while sanding the arm of an old rocking chair. Rex had paced from the kitchen table to the front door, claws ticking against the floorboards, his black and tan body tense, ears flicking toward sounds no human could yet hear. David had tried the usual rituals: low lights, weather radio, slow breathing, no sudden movement. But this storm was different. It did not mumble at the edges. It came like an army. The first lightning strike hit somewhere close enough to turn the windows white. The thunder followed so quickly it seemed to explode inside the walls. David dropped the sanding block. Rex barked once, sharp and broken, then backed into the hallway with his tail low and his amber brown eyes wide. The weather radio crackled with warnings about downed trees, flash flooding, and emergency crews stretched thin across the city. David stood frozen between the living room and the porch, one palm pressed against his ribs, where an old scar ached whenever fear found its way home. His mind tried to remain in Savannah, but memory had claws. One crash of thunder became a blast. The flashing window became fire. The rain became dust. For a moment, he was not a man in Georgia. He was a soldier again, hearing Harris call out through smoke, hearing himself promise help that had not come fast enough. Across the street, Mary Wilson's yellow house disappeared behind sheets of rain. Her tomato stakes bent flat. Her porch wind chimes clattered like tiny panic bells. David saw the old oak beside her back fence twist under a brutal gust, its massive limbs thrashing like a wounded giant. Then lightning split the sky again, and the oak came down with a sound so deep it seemed to crack the earth. The impact shook David's porch. Rex lunged backward, barking hoarsely now, every sound torn from terror rather than aggression. A power line snapped near the sidewalk, spitting blue sparks against the wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, thin and helpless beneath the roar of rain. David could not move. He hated that more than the fear itself. His legs locked. His hands went numb. The old shame rose in him, black and familiar. Here you are again, big man, soldier, survivor, useless when it matters. He saw himself from the outside, broad-shouldered and frozen in the doorway, while an old woman's house sat half-crushed across the street. Rex barked again, then whined, then spun in a frantic circle, as if fighting invisible orders. The dog's panic mirrored David's so perfectly it was almost cruel. Two veterans of different wars, both captured by thunder, both trembling before an enemy that was only sky. Then, through the storm, came Mary's voice. "David!" It was faint, nearly swallowed by rain, but it cut through him sharper than lightning. He lifted his head. Rex stopped barking for half a breath. "David! Help!" The cry came from behind Mary's house, near the small tin-roofed shed where she kept gardening tools, old Christmas decorations, and jars she claimed she would use one day when the Lord and tomatoes cooperated. The fallen oak had crushed part of the back fence and blocked the gate. David's chest tightened. The shed, she was trapped in the shed. Rex stared at him. The dog was shaking so hard his collar tags rattled, yet his eyes had changed. Fear still lived there, wild and bright, but beneath it something older had risen. Training, loyalty, the buried memory of running toward danger because someone needed to be found. David swallowed air that felt too thick to breathe. He reached for the crowbar he kept by the workbench. His fingers would not close at first. He forced them. "We don't have to be brave," he said to Rex, voice shaking. "We just have to go." Rex moved first. He bolted through the open door into the rain. Not cleanly, not fearlessly, but forward. David followed, boots slamming into puddles, crowbar gripped in one hand. The storm struck him like thrown gravel. Rain blinded him. Wind shoved at his shoulders. Rex ran low across the yard, then stopped abruptly near the sidewalk, barking at the snapping power line ahead. David saw the blue sparks leaping in the water and stumbled back just before stepping into danger. "Good boy!" he shouted, and the words tore out of him with something like awe. Rex veered left, leading him through Mary's side yard, around the fallen limbs, beneath branches that clawed at David's jacket like skeletal hands trying to pull him back into his old failures. Behind the house, Mary's shed leaned under the weight of a broken limb. Its tin roof had buckled, and the doorframe was twisted shut. Inside, Mary pounded weakly. "I'm here," she called, her usual humor stripped down to fear. Rex planted himself at the door and barked again and again, hoarse but steady, as though telling the storm exactly where to look. David jammed the crowbar into the warped latch. His hands slipped. He cursed. Thunder cracked overhead, and his body tried to fold. Rex pressed against his leg, not gently, not perfectly, but enough. A living weight, a furry anchor. David drove the crowbar down again. Wood split. Metal shrieked. The door gave way. Mary was crouched near a shelf, rainwater running through a tear in the roof. She had a shallow cut above one eyebrow, her silver curls plastered to her face, and mud smeared across her blue housecoat. Even frightened, she managed to glare at David. "Took you long enough," she rasped. "I was about to start charging rent." David laughed once, wild and breathless, then pulled her up. "Come on. He wrapped one arm around her small, sturdy frame and guided her out just as another branch crashed through the shed roof behind them. The sound punched through him, but he did not stop. Rex circled them, barking toward the safest path, avoiding the power line, forcing them wide around the fallen oak. By the time they reached David's yard, mud covered all three of them. Mary clung to his shoulder. David sank to one knee, shaking so hard he could barely hold her upright. Rex stood in front of them, soaked to the skin, sides heaving, graying muzzle lifted toward the storm like a knight challenging a dragon while secretly wishing the dragon would choose an indoor hobby. Red emergency lights finally bled through the rain. A rescue truck stopped at the curb, followed by a police cruiser. Captain Luis Ramirez climbed out first, a compact, broad-chested firefighter in his late 40s with tan skin, close-cropped black hair, and a salt-and-pepper mustache trimmed with military neatness. Years of pulling people from fires had made his voice calm without becoming cold. Behind him came Officer Karen Blake, a tall black woman in her 30s with braided hair tucked under her rain hood, sharp eyes, and the steady posture of someone who believed panic was contagious and refused to spread it. They rushed across the yard, but slowed when they saw the scene. David kneeling in the mud, Mary alive against his shoulder, and Rex planted before them, trembling violently but refusing to run. Captain Ramirez looked from the crushed shed to the dog, then to David. "You got her out?" David tried to answer, but no words came. Mary patted his shoulder with a muddy hand. "He and Officer Furry Judgment did," she said, voice thin but fierce. Rex leaned back until his wet body touched David's knee. David lowered one shaking hand, not onto the dog's head, not yet, but close enough for Rex to feel him there. Thunder rolled again over Savannah. Both man and dog flinched, but neither moved away. After the storm, Savannah woke beneath a washed blue sky, the summer sun pouring over wet roofs, broken branches, and shining streets, as if the city had been baptized by thunder. For 3 days, the neighborhood smelled of mud, sawdust, crushed leaves, and the strange, clean sweetness that follows destruction. Men with chainsaws cut apart the fallen oak behind Mary Wilson's house. Utility crews lifted the dead power line from the road. Children rode their bicycles slowly past David Miller's yard, whispering as if his little wooden house had become a shrine where something impossible had happened. David hated the attention. He hated the way people looked at him now, not with fear or pity, but with admiration, which somehow felt even more dangerous. Admiration expected a man to stand tall. David still woke at night with his heart kicking against his ribs like a trapped animal. He still flinched when a truck door slammed. He still checked the weather before bed. Heroes, he thought, were supposed to be made of bronze. He was mostly coffee, scar tissue, and poor sleep. Rex accepted fame with greater professionalism. The German shepherd, still lean and rough-coated, with a graying muzzle and eyes too wise for any creature who also chased crumbs under the stove, cared nothing for neighborhood praise. He cared deeply, however, about the roasted chicken Mary began sneaking across the street in folded foil. Mary herself had a bandage above one eyebrow now, a bruise blooming purple near her cheekbone, and the triumphant attitude of a queen who had survived an assassination attempt by a garden shed. "Officer Furry Judgment earned this," she told David one afternoon, holding out a strip of chicken. Rex sat with perfect dignity, as though accepting a medal from Congress. David folded his arms. "He's going to expect that every time thunder happens." Mary raised one silver eyebrow. "Good. So will you. I'm starting a storm snack program." The story spread anyway. Captain Luis Ramirez mentioned the rescue to a local reporter who had come asking about storm damage. Clara Brooks from the shelter heard about it and drove over with Sarah Whitaker. Clara stood on David's porch, short and sturdy beneath the heat, her silver-threaded braid tucked over one shoulder, and looked at Rex for a long moment. "They called him unadoptable," she said softly. Sarah, tall and freckled beside her, wiped one eye and pretended it was humidity. David scratched the back of his neck, uncomfortable under tenderness. "He was scared the whole time," he said. Clara smiled. "Most brave things are." That sentence stayed with him. A week later, David opened his front door before sunrise and did not close it again until evening. It was not a grand gesture. No trumpet sounded. No heavenly choir arrived, though Rex did sneeze with enough drama to suggest divine commentary. The open door simply let the house breathe. Warm air moved through the rooms. The smell of old fear thinned, Rex lay in the doorway, half inside and half outside, guarding both worlds like some mythic gatekeeper who had retired early but still took the job seriously. David also returned to something he had abandoned years before: the Veterans Support Group at the Savannah Community Center. The first evening he went, his hands shook so badly he almost turned the truck around twice. Rex sat beside him in a plain service harness Clara had helped adjust, watching the road with quiet suspicion. The community center was a low brick building with buzzing lights, faded bulletin boards, and a room that smelled of coffee, floor polish, and old folding chairs. The group leader, Marcus Reed, greeted them at the door. Marcus was a black man in his late 50s, tall and narrow-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and calm dark eyes that seemed to notice everything without cornering anyone. He had served as an army medic decades earlier, and the loss of a young patient in his arms had turned him into a man who believed listening could be a form of rescue. "You can sit near the exit," Marcus told David, as if he already knew. "Dog, too." David did not speak that first night. He sat with Rex under his chair while others talked. A broad, red-faced veteran named Paul Henderson, who had lost part of 2 fingers in a training accident and covered sorrow with terrible jokes, described how fireworks made him hide in his laundry room. A quiet woman named Angela Torres, a former helicopter mechanic with cropped black hair, brown skin, and a silver cross at her throat, admitted she still counted every exit in a grocery store. David listened. His shame, which had always seemed monstrous in solitude, looked smaller when seated among other people's wounds. Not gone, just less like a god. Then Rex began to snore. It happened during Angela's most serious sentence. One soft snort, then a second, then a full rumbling exhale from beneath David's chair. The room froze. Angela looked down. Paul pressed his lips together. Marcus stared at the ceiling with holy restraint. Then everyone laughed. Not cruelly, not loudly enough to break anything, just enough to place a thin blanket over the pain. David felt the laugh move through him, awkward and rusty, but real. Rex slept on, unashamed, a furry prophet of badly timed peace. Weeks passed. David still did not talk much, but he kept showing up. That became its own language. Mary waved from her porch when he left. Rex rode beside him like a captain supervising a suspicious voyage. At home, the house changed in small ways. The porch light came on at dusk. The curtains stayed open. David fixed the uneven kitchen table leg. He placed a second blanket on the living room floor, not because he expected storms, but because he no longer wanted to face them standing alone. The final storm came late one September night, when summer had begun loosening its grip but had not yet surrendered. Thunder rolled over Savannah, deep and ancient, like a beast turning in its sleep. David woke sharply, breath caught, body ready to fall back into old terror. Rex rose from the floor, trembling, ears pinned, eyes reflecting the blue flash of lightning. Fear entered the room as it always did, but this time, it did not find them separated. David took the blanket from the chair and spread it across the floor. His hands shook, but they moved with purpose. "Come here, boy," he whispered. Rex crossed the room slowly and lowered himself beside him. For the first time, the dog placed his head fully on David's chest. David rested one hand lightly against Rex's shoulder, feeling the frantic heartbeat beneath the damp warmth of his fur. Outside, the sky roared like an old dragon denied its treasure. Inside, a man and a dog flinched together, breathed together, stayed together. Nothing magical erased the past. Harris was still gone. Rex still remembered the blast. David still carried nights no morning could fully heal. But love, patient and stubborn as grass through cracked pavement, had taught their wounds to lie down, not disappear, not obey, just rest. And in that little house beneath the moss-hung oaks, 2 broken souls discovered the simplest miracle God sometimes leaves on earth. Not every heart is fixed by being repaired. Some are saved by being loved long enough to stop hiding. Sometimes, God does not send a miracle wrapped in thunder and light. Sometimes, He sends a broken dog to a broken man. David and Rex were not healed in one perfect moment. The nightmares did not disappear. The thunder still came. The fear still shook their bones. But little by little, they learned that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is staying when fear tells you to run. Courage is reaching for someone else, even when your own hands are trembling. In everyday life, many people carry invisible wounds. Some smile in public, and fall apart in silence. Some seem distant, cold, or difficult, when really they are just trying to survive memories no one else can see. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is not advice, not judgment, not a demand to move on, but patient love. A chair beside them, a quiet meal, a listening heart, a faithful presence in the storm. Maybe that is one of God's gentlest miracles. He does not always erase our scars. Sometimes, He places someone beside us who makes the scars easier to carry. So, when you meet someone who seems broken, remember David, remember Rex. Do not be too quick to call them useless. God may still be writing the bravest chapter of their life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment for those who are still fighting silent battles. Subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, animals, and second chances. May God bless you, protect your home, comfort your heart, and walk beside you through every storm.